How's everybody doing today? So I recently released a video of me making a batch of these leather pocket sheaths that I use for my Meridian bird and trout knives. And one of you asked me if I had a list of tools that I would recommend for a beginner, someone that's getting into making leather sheaths. So I tried typing something up. It was pretty lengthy, and I figured that a video would explain things better. And just to caveat this, I'm self-taught in leather, so everything that I've learned is from talking to other leather workers, watching videos online, discussing things with people at the leather store, and then experimentation. So I think the best teacher is actually experience. So going and building something, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and specifically for you, your style, and how you make things. So first things first. I will go over what I think the bare essential tools are, and then we'll get into further discussions on those tools, some alternatives, and then some more nice to haves. So yeah, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Okay, so those of you that don't want to wait around for the in-depth discussion about this type of stuff, I'm going to go over what I think is essential for making a quality sheath right up front here, and then we'll go into some deeper discussions, some additional tools you can purchase, things like that. So let's go over the basics here, get that out of the way, and then we'll move on from there. So first things first, I think a pen, pencil, and a ruler are an essential tools for making the sheath because you can do your layout, your design on paper or cardstock, and then transfer this to your veg tan leather. So that's the first set of tools. And then you can use pre-dyed leather, which is nice, or you can dye your own. If you dye your own, I recommend Fibing's Pro Dye. And then for application, some type of wool dauber or wool pad. Those work really well for application of your dyes. Cutting out your design, obviously you need some type of really sharp knife. I like utility knives because you can swap the blades in and out really easily. And then you don't have to pull out your sharpening stones and sharpen a regular knife for cutting it out. So these utility knives are great for cutting out your designs in your leather. For laying out your stitching lines and everything like that to make it just really nice and consistent and even, I like a pair of wing dividers. I think these are a great tool and they're relatively inexpensive. So not 100% necessary, but I really like this tool. For laying out your stitching lines, a type of pricking iron, or these are stitch punches, whatever you want to call them, but they come in a bunch of different sizes and shapes. And I think you need a 2-prong and a single prong. Those are the two that are necessary. You can get these other ones that are like 6-prong or 3-prong, and they make for a quicker layout if you have really straight areas. But not 100% necessary. These two, I think, would get you where you need to be in your layouts and your work. And then as far as punching these through the leather, you can't do it by hand. You have to hit it with something. And so that's what this mallet is for. And these are, leather working mallets. They use them for stamping and driving these punches and things like that. So these can be very expensive. So you can substitute that for something like one of these rubber mallets or a dead blow or some kind of rawhide mallet. I wouldn't use metal on metal, like a metal hammer on these. This will take a longer. You might have to hit this multiple times to get it to punch through, but it will work in a pinch. I used this for about a year before I got that nice mallet. A stitching awl, so this will help you widen the holes that you've already punched. And sometimes those punches won't go all the way through all the layers of leather if you have like multiple layers in a welt here. So you have to use this to continue the hole and punch it through all the layers of the leather. So stitching awl is essential. you'll widen that hole up so you can get your sewing needles to pass by each other. And then, of course, some sewing needles. These leather sewing needles are a little thicker gauge and they're blunt tipped, so they won't create new holes in your leather. They'll follow the existing ones, and then they also won't poke through the thread that you are using. And then the thread that I like to use is this Ritza Tiger thread. I use the 0.8 millimeter. This is a braided, pre-waxed line, and it's extremely strong, and it comes in a number of different colors. For gluing your edges together before you stitch, a contact cement is great. So this will hold everything in place. It adds an extra layer of strength, and it's a necessity. So contact cement is another item. Next up, a stitching pony. So this will hold your workpiece while you're working on it and allow you to manipulate both the needles and sew up your workpiece. So a stitching pony is definitely a necessary tool. Just a regular old lighter for terminating your stitch lines. So when we stitch, we'll stitch up and then we'll back stitch a ways, so it locks that thread in. But then we use a lighter to melt the tag ends that we have sticking out on there, and then we'll press that in. So then they mushroom out, and they will not go anywhere. They won't pull out. So just a basic Bic lighter is a great tool for that. And then as far as finishing, I like using an edge beveler. This is not 100% necessary, but this will help you round over real square edges. If you don't want to purchase one of these, you can do the same thing with sandpaper. It'll just take you longer. And then now that we're on the topic of sandpaper, a number of different grits from like 80 grit up to 800 grit people will use to smooth out their edges for burnishing. So I won't go quite up to 800. I'll maybe go up to 600 grit. Some people only go to 400 grit. It just depends on your technique and what you find works for you. But you do need sandpaper. You can use flap wheels. You can use, like here. You can use some type of like flap wheel like this. You can do it by hand. You can use a belt grinder like I do. You just have to be able to get this surface all even. So all 3 layers are even, no divots, no dents, and smooth for your burnishing. So sandpaper. And then lastly, some tools. So we're not talking about materials that I use like Tokonol burnishing gum or glycerin soap, saddle soap, anything like that. Just the tools that I like to use for burnishing and that I find work the best for me. And that is some type of denim. This is just a chunk of pat, jeans, and then you can use canvas if you had some canvas. But anyways, this is great for hand burnishing your edges, and then some type of slicker. So this is a wood slicker. It has a nice area here for really wide flat surfaces if you need. And then it has this end for like getting into holes, and then also these grooved pieces here so you can hit different thicknesses of leather and slick the top edges of those. So these are 2 nice, easy, cheap tools. And then lastly, some type of finishing coat. So I use leather balm with Adam's wax. You can use tan coat, Resolene, Snow Seal, Pro Coat. There's all kinds of different finishes. So you kind of have to research and see what the final finished product looks like, and if that's your desired look, and then also the properties of it. Some are waterproofing agents, other things like that. So just some type of finishing coat. So that's it for just the basics. And now we're going to roll into more detailed discussion about each one of those pieces. Okay, so first things first is you have to design your sheath, and you're designing all the components. So this is, my bird and trout one here. So this is the belt clip portion. This is the welt that goes inside here and protects the stitching from the cutting edge of the blade. And so you design all the different components. If you're going to do a belt clip or belt loop or something like that, you design everything out. There are a number of makers that have really good design videos. Two that come to mind right now are Ian Atkinson. He was one of the first ones that I ever found that had really detailed videos on how to design sheaths. And then the other one is Victor George. He's also pretty active on Instagram currently, and he's answered a number of questions that I've had. He actually helped me with the split toe design. So those are two makers. Their channels are linked in the description. Some really good videos from them. So you're going to design your sheath out using, I like using cardstock because it's easier to trace around than paper. So bare minimum, pen, pencil, and a ruler, some kind of measuring device. I think those are essential for sheath making. The next thing you need is obviously some leather. So any veg tanned leather, we don't use chromium tan because it can adversely react with steel. So any vegetable tanned leather is good. I like using 7 to 9 ounce leather. The 9 to 10 ounce, which this piece is 9 to 10 ounces, pretty thick. So something that's like for a pocket sheath, it'd be too thick for that. Any thinner than that, I find that it's maybe a little too flimsy, like it would flex too much. So I like that 7 to 9 ounce range, or 7, 8. So I like that. You can get leather that is pre-dyed, which is very nice because you can eliminate the whole dye step completely. But if you get raw veg tan leather like this and you want to add some color to it, you'll purchase these Fibings Pro Dyes, and they come in a number of different colors and shades. So this is like chocolate. These ones I dyed in mahogany. You can get saddle tan, you can get black, you can get like greens and reds and blues, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I recommend the Pro Dyes because they do give a nice even finish. Some of the other ones, it's hard to get a nice consistent finish. They can be kind of splotchy. And then as for application of the dyes, I like using these wool daubers, or for bigger pieces, I like using these wool pads. So they hold a lot of dye and you can get a nice even coat onto your leather with that. So up next, you're gonna need some kind of sharp cutting instrument. So I like using these utility blades because I can flip these blades around quickly and get a new sharp cutting surface. I can get a package of these blades relatively cheap, and they work pretty good for cutting leather. You can also use some type of like kiridashi like I made here. That works pretty well. And for thinner leathers, you can use an X-Acto knife. This does not work very well on thick leathers. They also make kind of an ulu shaped or a head knife, and I should make one for myself. But those are kind of expensive, so that's why I recommend using these. The head knives are nice because you can get some pretty good control with the corners of them, and you can get, do pretty thick leather, and curved cuts are easier with those type of knives. But some type of sharp cutting knife, I like the utility blades. They seem to work really well. All right, so now you have all your components cut out, they're dyed, and you're ready to start assembling things. So you will want to do your layout with, I like using wing dividers. I can set the width to where I want my stitch line to go, and I can scribe a line. It helps with consistency. You don't absolutely need this. You could eyeball and scribe your line on there with an awl or a pencil. But this just really helps get a nice consistent width from the edge of your piece to where your stitch line is going to be. So I like a good pair of wing dividers, and you can pick these up relatively cheap. You can find them in garage sales, estate sales, Goodwill, all that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for those. And then to glue things together, you will use contact cement. So this is just Tandy Leather Supply's house brand of contact cement. There's other brands like Barge. And everybody has their favorite brands, so you can try out a few over the years and see which one you like best. There is a difference between contact cement and rubber cement. So rubber cement is meant for temporary connections. So if you were mocking something up, you could use rubber cement, stick some things together, and then you could peel these apart. And then glue them up later. Contact cement is meant to be a permanent bond. So these are not meant to come apart. It is not strong enough to hold a sheath together on its own. So that's why we stitch afterwards. And then also stitching gives a good visual appearance on the sheath as well. So we've measured out our stitch line. We've contact cemented the sheath together. And then now we want to mark our stitching holes. And we use these, which are called like pricking irons or stitching punches. But they come in different shapes and sizes. These ones are diamond shaped on the holes that they punch. Some you can get are round, some are slotted, some are angled. So you just have to see which appearance you prefer. These were the cheapest ones that I could get, and these are the ones that I've been using, and I know how to use them, and I like them. So the other thing is they come in different widths between the prongs. So this is a 2 millimeter gap between those prongs. And then this one is a 4 millimeter gap between the prongs. So if you want really fine stitch lines, you can get a thinner gap. Then they also come with different number of prongs. So you can get them like this one's 6, this one's 2. You can get them with like 3, I think, and then singles. So the reason that you have multiple prongs is if you're doing a long straight stitch line like this, I can punch 6 holes at a time, and it saves me time with my layout. But when you get to an area that has a big curve in it, obviously I can't use this one because it doesn't match that curve. So I have to drop down to something with fewer prongs to make that radius. So this one will go around. And I like having the single because in an area on like say these slanted portions here, this is not quite evenly spaced. And so I will just go halfway between the corner holes and then use my single punch and punch a hole. So that's how punches work, and I'll talk about what tool I use to hit those punches next. Okay, so leather is tough enough that I can't just take these punches and press in. I can press hard enough that it may leave a mark, you know, some little marks, but there's no way that I'm gonna get this through this on my own. So you have to have something to press this through the leather. You can use an arbor press if you have one, and it has to be able to accept this tool. Or we use these leather mallets, which leather mallets, they're heavy, so they work really well for knocking that punch through the leather, but these are really expensive. This was like $45 for this. So you can use something like a dead blow hammer or some kind of rubber mallet. I used to use this before I bought this, and it works. It's not ideal, but it works. I would not use a metal hammer because metal on metal, it's really loud, and there's the potential for chipping this or, you know, mushrooming the end over. So I just would not recommend using a metal hammer on this, but a dead blow, some kind of rawhide mallet, or something like this. If you don't want to purchase one of these leather mallets, then that's what I would recommend for punching your holes for your stitch line. Okay, pardon the mess here, but you get to see what the whole scene looks like while we're filming. But this is the next item that I think is essential. This is a stitching pony. And so what this is it holds your workpiece for you and acts like a third hand when you're saddle stitching. And so I've tried to build sheaths without one of these. I built like 2 or 3 sheaths without one, and it was awful. This is made so you can sit on with your legs on either side of this, and then it comes up so it's sitting right in front of you. And then if you want, I like to run mine with a clamp, and I clamp it to my bench top so I can stand up and stitch. So I prefer to do it that way. You can use this sitting down so you don't have to purchase a clamp. This clamp was like $3 to $5 at Harbor Freight, so I felt that it was worth it. And that's how I like to hand stitch, stand up and stitch. Okay, the next thing that you'll need is some stitching. So I like to use this Ritza Tiger thread. I use the 0.8 millimeter. What this is a braided line that is pre-waxed, so you don't have to wax it separately. And it's extremely strong and a very durable thread. So it comes in a number of different colors. There's like white, black, red, yellow, blue, tan, brown. There's all kinds of colors. And then you'll need some kind of leather stitching needles. So the difference between these and like normal stitching needles that you would use for clothing, like that you have in your sewing kit at home, is these are pretty thick gauge, and then they're also dull because you have pre-poked your holes. You don't want to create new holes when you're poking through, and you don't want to pierce your thread when you're passing your needles through in your hole when you're doing your saddle stitch. So these are relatively cheap, and they come in like a 10 pack. I still have all the ones that I bought years and years ago. So that's what you'll need for stitching, and then also a stitching awl. So when you poke your holes with that punch, those holes are fairly small. And they only go about 90% or 95% of the way through this leather. So you'll use your stitching awl to finish going through the back face of the leather and to widen that hole out so you can get both those thread pieces past each other easily. And then the leather will shrink back up on that stitching over time. So stitching awl is almost, it's necessary for doing hand stitching. And then as far as like your final finish on your leather, it depends on what qualities you're looking for. So I want, if you want this leather to be waterproof, if you want it to be shiny, if you want it to be matte finish, there's all the different types of things and different coatings that you can put onto leather. These are just two. There's tens of or hundreds of them out there, and different ways of applying them and so forth. So talk to someone who knows, does a lot of leather work. If you have a leather store that you can go into, they will have examples of what these look like. I didn't like Resolene, and I didn't like how like plasticky it looked because it is an acrylic finish. So I went away from this, but there's like top coat, pro coat, all kinds of different stuff. I really like Adam's wax and how it finishes out. It is not the most weather resistant. So if you're looking to make it like completely waterproof, then, you can use something like Snow Seal and all those different things, but that's something that you have to play around with. Some coatings can actually make leather stiffer, all that kind of thing. So, those are ones to talk to people, experiment around, and see what you like best. But I definitely think that you should finish your leather with something. Okay, here's some specialty tools that I only use every once in a while, and some of these I've purchased and I don't use them at all anymore. So let's kind of go over what some of these are. This one is a punch. So it's hard to drill. Like if you want to make a hole in leather, you kind of need to do punches. Drills will like tear up the leather and they don't make a nice clean hole. So punches are nice for making nice clean holes for rivets or belt loop holes, things like that. So this is an expensive tool, but if you have a sheath design that needs that and it's a necessity, then this is something that you would buy. Otherwise, it's not necessary. You don't need it. The next one is, this is a stitching wheel. So it's will help you lay out your stitching lines. So have different wheels that have different spacing. The wheels that I have don't match the 4mm stitching pricking irons that I use, and so I don't use this hardly at all anymore. But it is nice if you have that wheel. You can use it to roll back over your stitching and lay it down and really get a nice, clean, even finish on it. But this is not a necessity. So that's another tool that is a nice to have in certain situations, but not a necessity. The next one here is a stitching groover. And so it has this arm that you can adjust how far away from the groover you want to be. So from the edge of the leather, essentially. Let me tighten this back up. And it'll cut a groove into your leather. And so some people really like to do that for their stitching. So they'll cut a groove and then they'll use their pricking irons and they'll do their stitching holes in there, and it lays it down below the surface. The only time that I use this is on like the backside of a belt loop, where it's going to be rubbing against someone's like pants while they're riding on their horse or out hiking, something like that, to recess that stitching below the level of the leather. But honestly, with how deep these stitches get pulled in, they don't really rub on people's clothing. And this thread is super tough, and so I don't think it's as much of a concern in today's sheath design as it used to be. The next item that I don't really use anymore is this groover. So it has this blade piece that comes down, and you can run it on a piece of leather and cut a groove that goes partway through the leather. And then that's supposed to make it easier to bend along that point. So some people will do that on like really thick sheaths. They'll groove a line in the middle inside of that leather so it bends easier. But I've found that I don't really need that on any of my designs. So I don't use this tool at all anymore. So there's some other specialty tools like these different punches. There's different sizes. So if you have an inside radius that you from like the top of the sheath to a belt loop, you can use these to get a nice tight radius. Whereas you know, the utility knife would be difficult to do that with and get a really nice clean look. So these punches, when the design dictates, you may have to purchase something like that. Also, like there's oblong punches like this one. I use that on this sheath to punch a hole for the clip to go. And so, you know, this design dictated that I needed something like that. So I purchased that tool. This is another tool that I rarely use. It's a skiving knife, so it's meant to thin leather down. It's made for right-handers, and I'm left-handed, so I think that's part of the difficulty with me using it. But I just never seem to be able to get it to bite in very good. So this is one tool that I wouldn't recommend. If I need to thin out leather for welts or anything like that, I can do that with a utility blade and thin that out. Another type of like skiving knife is this one, and so that's for thinning out material on the edge or in the center of your piece. But this one actually works really well. It's just there's not a whole lot of occasions where it is necessary. So this is a upgrade tool, if you will. Okay, hopefully this helps out a little bit on the tools that you need for doing some leather sheaths. So just to recap, the bare essentials that I think that you would need for creating a good quality sheath are obviously a pen, pencil, and a ruler. If you're going to do pre-dyed leather, you don't have to worry about these items, but some type of pro dye and then a wool dauber or some type of applicator. Some type of sharp knife. I suggest a utility knife for cutting out the leather. Some wing dividers for laying out your stitch line. These are not absolutely essential, but I think they really help out and are nice to have. Contact cement for gluing all your edges together and your components of the sheath together. Pricking irons or stitching awls for punching out your stitch line and laying out your holes. Stitching needles and thread. Just a lighter for melting your stitch line and terminating it. A stitching awl. Not a necessity, but a corner beveler, edge beveler is nice to have. If you don't want to purchase one of these, you can do the same work with sandpaper. It'll just take you a lot longer. Sandpaper is another one for smoothing out all your edges. Some type of mallet for hitting your pricking irons. And then some burnishing items. I suggest some denim and one of these edge slickers. The stitching pony to hold your workpiece. And of course, a finishing coat, as in tan coat, Adam's wax, Resolene, or something that you prefer to seal off your leather. So hopefully that was helpful, and it gives you an idea of the bare minimum tools that you would need to make a sheath. That's my recommendation. Other sheath makers may have some suggestions that they can drop in the comments below. And obviously, as your designs progress, you may need some specialty tools, say, for example, something to rivet snaps onto, retention strap onto a sheath or something like that. But yeah, you can make some great quality sheaths with the tools that I showed. And then you can start creating new designs, some cool things for your different pieces. So. Couple cool knives here. Obviously the pocket sheath. This one with a fold over belt loop. And then even something like this for a giant Bowie knife. Snap retention. All right, so that about wraps it up for this one. If you have any questions, please drop them down below. If you have any suggestions or tips for leather work like this, please drop them down below as well. I got some good ones on the last video that I did, and I learn something new every time I build a sheath. And so I enjoy learning new little tips and tricks, things that make things easier or faster or better. That's the fun part about building stuff. So, and the more that you do it, the better you get. So, but yeah, so that'll do it for this one. Hope you guys have a good week, and cheers.